Welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wajenberg. This time we're going to continue our reading of Lilith by George MacDonald. Our narrator, Mr. Vane, is wandering back and forth between our world and another, and in both he keeps meeting a Mr. Raven, whom he's recently discovered to be Adam, the Adam, our first father. And he also meets a cruel and beautiful princess, whom, given the title of the story, we may take to be Lilith, the wife Adam had before Eve. Lilith has just been captured and momentarily imprisoned by Adam. "There is not a minute to lose. You must go." "I will at once," I replied, and moved for the door. "You will sleep tonight in my hostelry," he said, not as a question, but in a tone of mild authority. "My heart is with the children," I replied, "but if you insist—" "I do insist. You can otherwise effect nothing. I will go with you as far as the mirror and see you off." He rose. There came a sudden shock in the closet. Apparently the leopardess had flung herself against the heavy door. I looked at my companion. "Come, come," he said. Ere we reached the door of the library, a howling yell came after us, mingled with the noise of claws that scored at the hard oak. I hesitated and half turned. "To think of her lying there alone," I murmured, "with that terrible wound." "Nothing will ever close that wound," he answered with a sigh. "It must eat into her heart. Annihilation itself is no death to evil. Only good where evil was is evil dead. An evil thing must live with its evil until it chooses to be good. That alone is the slaying of evil." I held my peace until a sound I did not understand overtook us. "If she should break loose," I cried. "Make haste," he rejoined. "I shall hurry down the moment you are gone, and I have disarranged the mirrors." We ran and reached the wooden chamber breathless. Mr. Raven seized the chairs and adjusted the hood. Then he set the mirrors in their proper relation and came beside me in front of the standing one. Already I saw the mountain range emerging from the mist. Between us, wedging us asunder, darted with a yell of a demon a huge bulk of the spotted leopardess. She leaped through the mirror as through an open window and settled at once into a low, even, swift gallop. I cast a look of dismay at my companion and sprang through to follow her. He came after me leisurely. "You need not run," he called. "You cannot overtake her. This is our way." As he spoke, he turned in the opposite direction. "She has more magic at her fingertips than I care to know," he added quietly. "We must do what we can," I said, and ran on, but sickening as I saw her dwindle in the distance, stopped and went back to him. "Doubtless we must," he answered. "But my wife has warned Mara, and she will do her part. You must sleep first. You have given me your word." "Nor do I mean to break it. But surely sleep is not the first thing. Surely action takes precedence of repose." "A man can do nothing he is not fit to do. See, did I not tell you Mara would do her part?" I looked whither he pointed, and saw a white spot moving at an acute angle with the line taken by the leopardess. "There she is," he cried. "The spotted leopardess is strong, but the white is stronger. I have seen them fight. The combat did not appear decisive as to that. How should such eyes tell which have never slept? The princess did not confess herself beaten, that she never does, but she fled. When she confesses her last hope is gone, it is indeed hard to kick against the goad. Then will her day begin to dawn. Come, come, he who cannot act must make haste to sleep." Chapter 31. The Old Sexton's House. The Old Sexton's Horse. I stood and watched the last gleam of the white leopardess melt away, then turned to follow my guide, but reluctantly. What had I to do with sleep? Surely reason was the same in every world, and what reason could there be in going to sleep with the dead when the hour was calling to the living man? Besides, no one would wake me, and how could I be certain of waking early, or of waking at all? The sleepers in that house let morning glide into noon, and noon into night, nor ever stirred. I murmured, but followed, for I knew not what else to do. The librarian walked on in silence, and I walked silent as he. Time and space glided past us. The sun set, it began to grow dark, and I felt in the air the spreading cold of the chamber of death. My heart sank lower and lower. I began to lose sight of the lean, long-coated figure, and at length could no more hear his swishing stride through the heather. But then I heard instead the slow flapping wings of the raven, and at intervals now a firefly, now a gleaming butterfly rose into the rayless air. By and by the moon appeared, slowly crossing the far horizon. "You are tired, are you not, Mr. Vane?" said the raven, alighting on a stone. "You must make acquaintance with the horse that will carry you in the morning." He gave a strange whistle through his long black beak. A spot appeared on the face of the half-risen moon. To my ears came presently the drumming of swift, soft-galloping hooves, and in a minute or two, out of the very disk of the moon, low thundered the terrible horse. His mane flowed away behind him like the crest of a wind-fighting wave, torn seaward in hoary spray, and the whisk of his tail kept blinding the eye of the moon. 19 hands he seemed, huge of bone, tight of skin, hard of muscle, a steed the holy Death himself might choose on which to ride abroad and slay. The moon seemed to regard him with awe. In her scary light he looked a very skeleton, loosely roped together. Terrifically large, he moved with the lightness of a winged insect. As he drew near, his speed slackened, and his mane and tail drifted about him, settling. Now, I was not merely a lover of horses, but I loved every horse I saw. I had never spent money except upon horses, and had never sold a horse. The sight of this mighty one, terrible to look at, woke in me longing to possess him. It was pure greed, nay, rank covetousness, an evil thing in all worlds. I do not mean that I could have stolen him, but that, regardless of his proper place, I would have bought him if I could. I laid my hands on him and stroked the protuberant bones that humped a hide smooth and thin and shiny as satin, so shiny the very shape of the moon was reflected in it. I fondled his sharp-pointed ears, whispered words in them, and breathed into his red nostrils the breath of a man's life. He in return breathed into mine the breath of a horse's life, and we loved one another. What eyes he had! Blue filmy like the eyes of the dead. Behind each was a glowing coal. The raven, with wings half extended, looked on pleased at my love-making to his magnificent horse. "That is well. Be friends with him," he said. "He will carry you all the better tomorrow. Now we must hurry home." My desire to ride the horse had grown passionate. "May I not mount him at once, Mr. Raven?" I cried. "By all means," he answered. "Mount and ride him home." The horse bent his head over my shoulder lovingly. I twisted my hands in his mane and scrambled on his back, not without aid from certain protuberant bones. "He would outspeed any leopard in creation," I cried. "Not that way at night," answered the raven. "The road is difficult. But come, loss now will be gain then. To wait is harder than to run, and its meed is the fuller. Go on, my son, straight to the cottage. I shall be there as soon as you. It will rejoice my wife's heart to see son of hers on that horse." I sat silent. The horse stood like a block of marble. "Why do you linger?" asked the raven. "I long so much to ride after the leopardess," I answered, "that I can scarce restrain myself." "You have promised." "My debt to the little ones appears, I confess, a greater thing than my bond to you. Yield to the temptation, and you will bring mischief upon them, and also upon yourself." "What matters it for me? I love them, and love works no evil. I will go." But the truth was, I had forgotten the children, infatuate with the horse. Eyes flashed through the darkness, and I knew that Adam stood in his own shape beside me. I knew also by his voice that he repressed an indignation almost too strong for him. "Mr. Vane," he said, "do you not know why you have not yet done anything worth doing?" "Because I have been a fool," I answered. "Wherein?" "In everything." "Which do you count your most indiscreet action?" "Bringing the princess to life. I ought to have left her to her just fate." "Nay, now you talk foolishly. You could not have done otherwise than you did, not knowing she was evil. But you never brought anyone to life. How could you, yourself dead?" "I dead?" I cried. "Yes," he answered, "and you will be dead so long as you refuse to die." "Back to the old riddling," I returned scornfully. "Be persuaded and go home with me," he continued gently. "The most, nearly the only foolish thing you ever did was to run from our dead." I pressed the horse's ribs, and he was off like a sudden wind. I gave him a pat on the side of the neck, and he went about in a sharp-riven curve, close to the ground, like a cat when scratchingly she wheels about after a mouse, leaning sideways till his mane swept the tops of the heather. Through the dark I heard the wings of the raven. 5 quick flaps I heard, and he perched on the horse's head. The horse checked himself instantly, ploughing up the ground with his feet. "Mr. Vane," croaked the raven, "think what you are doing. Twice already has evil befallen you, once from fear and once from heedlessness. Breach of word is far worse. It is a crime." "The little ones are in frightful peril, and I brought it upon them," I cried. "But indeed I will not break my word to you. I will return and spend in your house what nights, what days, what years you please." "I tell you once more, you will do them other than good if you go tonight," he insisted. But a false sense of power, a sense which had no root and was merely vibrating into me from the strength of the horse, had, alas, rendered me too stupid to listen to anything he said. "Would you take from me my last chance of reparation?" I cried. "This time there shall be no shirking. It is my duty, and I will go if I perish for it." "Go then, foolish boy," he returned with anger in his croak. "Take the horse and ride to failure. May it be to humility." He spread his wings and flew. Again I pressed the lean ribs under me. "After the spotted leopardess," I whispered in his ear. He turned his head this way and that, snuffing the air, then started and went a few paces in a slow, undecided walk. Suddenly he quickened his walk, broke into a trot, began to gallop, and in a few minutes his speed was tremendous. He seemed to see in the dark, never stumbled, not once faltered, nor once hesitated. I sat on the ridge of a wave. I felt under me the play of each individual muscle. His joints were so elastic, and his every movement glided so into the next, that not once did he jar me. His growing swiftness bore him along until he flew rather than ran. The wind met and passed us like a tornado. Across the evil hollow we sped like a bolt from an arblast. No monster lifted its neck. All knew the hooves that thundered over their heads. We rushed up the hills. We shot down their farther slopes. From the rocky chasms of the riverbed he did not swerve. He held on over them his fierce, terrible gallop. The moon, halfway up the heaven, gazed with a solemn trouble in her pale countenance. Rejoicing in the power of my steed and in the pride of my life, I sat like a king and rode. We were near the middle of the many channels, my horse every other moment clearing one, sometimes 2 in his great stride, and now and then gathering himself for a great bounding leap, when the moon reached the keystone of her arch. Then came a wonder and a terror. She began to descend, rolling like the nave of Fortune's wheel, bowled by the gods, and went faster and faster. Like our own moon, this one had a human face, and now the broad forehead, now the chin was uppermost as she rolled. I gazed aghast. Across the ravines came the howling of wolves. An ugly fear began to invade the hollow places of my heart. My confidence was on the wane. The horse maintained his headlong swiftness, with ears pricked forward and thirsty nostrils exulting in the wind his career created. But there was the moon, jolting like an old chariot wheel down the hill of heaven with awful boding. She rolled at last over the horizon edge and disappeared, carrying all light with her. The mighty steed was in the act of clearing a wide, shallow channel when we were caught in the net of the darkness. His head dropped. Its impetus carried his helpless bulk across, but he fell in a heap on the margin, and where he fell he lay. I got up, kneeled beside him, and felt him all over. Not a bone could I find broken, but he was a horse no more. I sat down on the body and buried my face in my hands. Chapter 32. The Lovers and the Bags. Bitterly cold grew the night. The body froze under me. The cry of the wolves came nearer. I heard their feet soft padding on the rocky ground. Their quick panting filled the air. Through the darkness I saw the many glowing eyes. Their half-circle contracted about me. My time was come. I sprang to my feet. Alas, I had not even a stick. Then came in a rush, their eyes flashing with fury of greed, their black throats agape to devour me. I stood hopelessly waiting them. One moment they halted over the horse, then came at me. With the sound of swiftness all but silence, a cloud of green eyes came down on their flank. The heads that bore them flew at the wolves with a cry feebler yet fiercer than their howling snarl, and by the cry I knew them. They were cats, led by a huge gray one. I could see nothing of him but his eyes, yet I knew him, and so knew his color and bigness. A terrific battle followed, whose tale alone came to me through the night. I would have fled, for surely it was but a fight which would have me. Only where was the use? My first step would be a fall, and my foes of either kind could both see and scent me in the dark. All at once I missed the howling, and the caterwauling grew wilder. Then came the soft padding, and I knew it meant flight. The cats had defeated the wolves. In a moment, the sharpest of sharp teeth were in my leg. A moment more, and the cats were all over me in a live cataract, biting wherever they could bite, furiously scratching me anywhere and everywhere. A multitude clung to my body. I could not flee. Madly I fell on the hateful swarm, every finger instinct with destruction. I tore them off me. I throttled at them in vain. When I would have flung them from me, they clung to my hands like limpets. I trampled them under my feet, thrust my fingers in their eyes, caught them in the jaws stronger than theirs, but could not rid myself of one. Without cease they kept discovering upon me space for fresh mouthfuls. They hauled at my skin with widespread, horribly curved pincers of clutching claws. They hissed and spat in my face, but never touched it until in my despair I threw myself on the ground, when they forsook my body and darted at my face. I rose, and immediately they left it, the more to occupy themselves with my legs. In an agony I broke from them and ran, careless whither, cleaving the solid dark. They accompanied me in a surrounding torrent, now rubbing, now leaping up against me, but tormenting me no more. When I fell, which was often, they gave me time to rise. When from fear of falling I slackened my pace, they flew afresh at my legs. All that miserable night they kept me running, but they drove me by a comparatively smooth path, for I tumbled into no gully, and passing the evil wood without seeing it, left it behind in the dark. When at length the morning appeared, I was beyond the channels, and on the verge of the orchard valley. In my joy I would have made friends with my persecutors, but not a cat was to be seen. I threw myself on the moss and fell fast asleep. I was waked by a kick, to find myself bound hand and foot, once more the thrall of the giants. What fitter, I said to myself, to whom else should I belong? And I laughed in the triumph of self-disgust. A second kick stopped my false merriment, and thus recurrently assisted by my captors, I succeeded at length in rising to my feet. 6 of them were about me. They undid the rope that tied my legs together, attached a rope to each of them, and dragged me away. I walked as well as I could, but as they frequently pulled both ropes at once, I fell repeatedly, whereupon they always kicked me up again. Straight to my old labor they took me, tied my leg ropes to a tree, undid my arms, and put the hateful flint in my left hand. Then they lay down and pelted me with fallen fruit and stones, but seldom hit me. If I could have freed my legs and got hold of a stick I spied a couple of yards from me, I would have fallen upon all 6 of them. But the little ones will come at night, I said to myself, and was comforted. All day I worked hard. When the darkness came, they tied my hands and left me fast to the tree. I slept a good deal, but woke often, and every time from a dream of lying in the heart of a heap of children. With the morning my enemies reappeared, bringing their kicks and their bestial company. It was about noon, and I was nearly failing from fatigue and hunger, when I heard a sudden commotion in the brushwood, followed by a burst of the bell-like laughter so dear to my heart. I gave a loud cry of delight and welcome. Immediately rose a trumpeting as of baby elephants, a neighing as of foals, and a bellowing as of calves, and through the bushes came a crowd of little ones, on diminutive horses, on small elephants, on little bears. But the noise came from the riders, not the animals. Mingled with the mounted ones walked the bigger of the boys and girls, among the latter a woman with a baby crowing in her arms. The giants sprang to their lumbering feet, but were instantly saluted with a storm of sharp stones. The horses charged their legs, the bears rose and hugged them at the waist, the elephants threw their trunks round their necks and pulled them down, and gave them such a trampling as they had sometimes given but never received before. In a moment my ropes were undone, and I was in the arms, seemingly innumerable, of the little ones. For some time I saw no more of the giants. They made me sit down, and my Lona came and without a word began to feed me with the loveliest red and yellow fruits. I sat and ate, the whole colony mounting guard until I had done. Then they brought up 2 of the largest of their elephants, and having placed them side by side, hooked their trunks and tied their tails together. The docile creatures could have untied their tails with a single shake, and unhooked their trunks by forgetting them, but tails and trunks remained as their little masters had arranged them, and it was clear the elephants understood that they must keep their bodies parallel. I got up and laid myself in the hollow between their 2 backs, and when the wise animals, counteracting the weight that pushed them apart, leaned against each other and made for me a most comfortable litter. My feet, it is true, projected beyond their tails, but my head lay pillowed on an ear of each. Then some of the smaller children, mounted for a bodyguard, ranged themselves in a row along the back of each of my bearers, and the whole assembly formed itself in a train, and the procession began to move. Whither they were carrying me I did not try to conjecture. I yielded myself to their pleasure, almost as happy as they. Chattering and laughing and playing glad tricks innumerable at first, the moment they saw I was going to sleep, they became as still as judges. I woke. A sudden musical uproar greeted the opening of my eyes. We were traveling through the forest in which they found the babies, and which, as I had suspected, stretched all the way from the valley to the hot stream. A tiny girl sat with her little feet close to my face and looked down at me coaxingly for a while, then spoke, the rest seeming to hang on her words. "We make a petition to the king," she said. "What is it, my darling?" I asked. "Shut your eyes 1 minute," she answered. "Certainly I will. Here goes," I replied, and shut my eyes close. "No, no, not before I tell you," she cried. I opened them again, and we talked and laughed together for quite another hour. "Close your eyes," she said suddenly. I closed my eyes and kept them closed. The elephants stood still. I heard a soft scurry, a little rustle, and then a silence, for in that world some silences are heard. "Open your eyes," 20 voices a little way off shouted at once, but when I obeyed, not a creature was visible except the elephants that bore me. I knew the children were marvelously quick in getting out of the way, the giants had taught them that, but when I raised myself and looked about in the open shrubless forest, I could descry neither hand nor heel, and stared in blank astonishment. The sun was set, and it was fast getting dark, yet presently a multitude of birds began to sing. I lay down to listen, pretty sure that if I left them alone, the hiders would soon come out again. The singing grew to a little storm of bird voices. Surely the children must have something to do with it, and yet how could they set the birds singing, I said to myself as I lay and listened. Soon, however, happening to look up into the tree under which my elephants stood, I thought I spied a little motion among the leaves, and looked more keenly. Sudden white spots appeared in the dark foliage, the music died down, a gale of childish laughter rippled the air, and white spots came out in every direction. The trees were full of children. In the wildest merriment they began to descend, some dropping from bough to bough so rapidly I could scarce believe they had not fallen. I left my litter and was instantly surrounded, a mark for all the artillery of their jubilant fun. With stately composure, the elephants walked away to bed. "But," said I, when their uproarious gladness had had scope for a while, "how is it that I never before heard you sing like the birds? Even when I thought it must be you, I could hardly believe it." "Ah," said one of the wildest, "but we were not birds then. We were running creatures, not flying creatures. We had our hiding places in the bushes then, but when we came to no bushes, only trees, we had to build nests. When we built nests, we grew birds, and when we were birds, we had to do like birds. We asked them to teach us their noises, and they taught us. And now we are real birds. Come and see my nest. It's not big enough for you, but it's big enough for you to see me in it." I told him I could not get up a tree without the sun to show me the way. When he came, I would try. "Kings seldom have wings," I added. "King, king," cried one, "you know none of us has wings. Arms and legs are better." That is true. I can get up without wings, and carry straws in my mouth, too, to build a nest with. You know, he answered, and went away. A moment later, I heard him calling out of his nest, a great way up a walnut tree of enormous size. Up again, King. Good night. I am sleepy. And I heard him no more till he woke me in the morning. And in the morning, we will follow Mr. Vane in his further adventures. Thank you.